Hello and welcome to the World Wanderers podcast, your source for travel stories, travel destinations, and travel philosophy.
I'm Amanda.
I'm Ryan.
And we're your hosts. Hey everybody, and welcome to today's episode of the podcast. Today we're going to be talking about
Italia.
Wee! I was trying to think of an Italian sound effect.
Wee. That's a Mario sound effect.
Yes. And we decided to do an episode on Italy today because one of our most recent episodes on food and travel kind of reminded us of something that I really enjoyed in Italy, which was farinata. And so I actually didn't use the word in the food and travel. I called it the fried chickpea bread because I didn't know what it was called. But since then I have researched it and it is farinata. And then we started thinking about farinata and gelato and pizza. And we were like, ooh, Italia.
And Italy had been on our radar to do an episode about for a long time. So we were kind of like, we've done an episode on Italy, haven't we? But no, we hadn't.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because we're approaching 100 episodes of the podcast. Oh, the crowd goes wild. And
they never thought we were going to make it.
Yeah, maybe not. I didn't know if we were going to make it. And so sometimes we have these moments of like, have we done that? Did we not talk about that already? We should probably talk about that. So Italy kind of felt like it was Italy's time. So we traveled by train via Switzerland into Italy, and we started in the northern part of Italy with a stop in Milan.
Milano.
So Italian.
I'll be the Italian sound effect guy.
Okay, I'm counting on you for the Italian sound effects in this episode then. And so we arrived in Milan, and we arrived like sort of mid-morning to early afternoon, and we actually only had one night in Milan, which I think was probably our first mistake in general. But we really wanted to see a soccer, or as they call it, a football game. They call it football.
Football, yeah.
Yeah, that was the very good sound effect. And so we spent most of the day actually trying to fandangle our tickets. Do you want to talk a little bit about that process and what that was like?
Yeah, going over to Europe, watching a European football match was kind of on our bucket list. And it was getting near the end of our trip. We were going to go to Greece after Italy and then leave Europe. So hadn't had much time. But when we were in Switzerland, we went online, found out, there's a game happening in Milan. Let's buy tickets. So we bought tickets online, and it was one of those things where you had to go pick them up in person. And so when we got to Milan, it's August in Italy, which means like, other than tourism, there's like literally nothing happening. Like everything's closed. It's hot. So we walk over to the place we're supposed to pick up our tickets, which is like some sort of FedEx shipping office. And then there's a sign on the door that's like, closed until September, basically. Or like 2 weeks later, sometime in like August.
Yeah, we were like, what? Oh, God.
Yeah, but it turns out the problem was actually just because we had booked on the version of the site we booked on was like the UK version. So the time they gave us for pickup was like 1 p.m., but it was actually 3 p.m. And we'd ran into some people on the street who were like, oh, yeah, we're having the same issue. I think it's because of this other time you have to come back at.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was kind of, it was all very confusing. Like the shipping office wasn't, down the street from our hostel or anything like that. Like it was quite out of the way where we had to go. And so it's like we arrive there, we get some food, we check in, we go to get these tickets right away. We find out that we can't get these tickets after there's a debacle. And then we kind of like go back to our hostel and then come back to get these tickets. And then by the time we actually got our tickets, which is actually kind of a really, I don't know, it felt like a sketchy process. Like it was kind of just like two dudes like waiting outside this store that had tickets. Like it didn't feel official in any way. And so there's kind of this like nervousness, like, oh, did we just get like really screwed over? And now we're going to go try to get in and these tickets aren't going to work and all that sort of thing. And so really our entire day spent in Milan was dealing with the tickets. So I think there's a really beautiful cathedral in Milan, and I'm pretty sure we saw it from a public bus, but we really didn't get to see any of Milan, which I think is super unfortunate.
Yeah, it never was really on my list of things to see.
Well, your list of things to see is always
quite short.
Yes. I mean, I wasn't like dying to see Milan. I think though it's one of those things that we arrived and then you start reading about all like the cool things that are there and you hear about them and you can kind of like see this really beautiful cathedral from a bus window and you're like, oh, I should really go check that out since I'm here. Like, how often are you in Milan? I mean, I guess the same thing can be said for seeing a soccer game.
Yeah, that was really like the thing I wanted to do there.
And so what was that experience like for you?
So we went out to the gigantic soccer stadium in Milan to watch AC Milan versus Juventus. I feel like I might be pronouncing Juventus. I think
just own it.
Anyways, yeah, it was a pretty cool experience. I've never been a big soccer fan. It's kind of, I never played it enough to really like grasp like the strategy and the happenings. Mm-hmm. And the game we watched was an exhibition game. I think the score was like 1-1 or something like that. And it just felt like not much was going on.
Yeah, it was a little bit slow. It was like slower than I expected.
Yeah, and I think that because we were traveling over the summer, it's pretty like low season for football or soccer. So when we go back to Europe in the future, I'd love to go to a game that has more of like a higher stakes. Like
Manchester United versus some other English team.
Yeah, or when we were in Barcelona, we went and toured their stadium there, and that would be really cool to see.
Yeah.
Barcelona play.
Yeah, definitely. I understand what you're saying for sure. I think too, we'd also really like looked up where sort of like the safer areas in the stadium are to get tickets. And like, we didn't want to end up on the wrong side, like in the wrong colors, because that can actually be really dangerous because people are pretty diehard fans. And so I think there was like some more fun areas where things were a bit more upbeat, but we'd strategically gotten tickets in an area that wasn't going to be too crazy. And I think we lost like a little bit of the fun because of that.
Yeah. And it's funny now having gone to a soccer game in Medellin, Colombia, which is a real crazy experience.
It was like Colombia versus Colombia too.
It was Medellin versus Medellin.
Yeah, so I think we got like a pretty epic experience there.
In terms of, yeah, like crazy fanness, and you can check out our Medellin or our Colombia episode if you want to hear more about that. But at the time, yeah, I think we were both a little bit, you'd heard stuff about crazy European soccer fans, and we're like, oh, I don't want to sit in a weird section and get into trouble.
Yeah, like I don't want to get thrown off like this upper level or something because I'm not wearing the right color. And they're like, who do you cheer for? And I'm like, who should I cheer for? I don't know. But I think it was like a cool experience. I think because it had been such a hassle, it was like so exhausting going back and forth all day. And then we get there and it was kind of slow. And I remember I was sunburned, and I don't sunburn very easily, so I'm kind of a little bit precious when I get a sunburn. Like my neck just hurt so bad, and it was hot in that stadium. It was so hot in Italy in August, and just like being a bit uncomfortable is kind of what I remember from that. But it was a cool experience. I think definitely some good learning. Like I think the biggest thing that I learned is that trying to like rush to do something is not always worth it. Like I think we stopped in Milan so that we could go to that game. And I mean, it was a cool experience. I just don't know. Is it worth the stop on the bus, the extra hostel, the whole day that we spent fandangling, trying to figure out our tickets just for that game? Like, what do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's something we've been kind of learning over and over and again as you traveled, where you go out and you want to do a bunch of stuff. And oftentimes it's better if you're just like, oh, I really want to do that, but this time it's not going to be the time. And I think that was the case for us there. We were like, oh, got to go to see a football game while we're in Europe. And this is really like our last chance. So we went to one. That was kind of like, not a great one to go to.
Yeah, and that's definitely, I mean, it's a continual learning experience for me, and it's something that I get somewhere and I just want to do it all at once. And I want to, I don't know, like, I guess it's like, I want to like experience everything that I can in case I never get a chance to come back here again. I think that's like always the way I'm thinking. And that's, you know, that's a good way to think in a lot of instances, like kind of like live it up sort of thing. But then it can also be like, it can hinder you in some ways because you're trying to like shove so much stuff into a trip. And I think that's like finding a balance in that. Like, okay, this isn't going to work. Like, it's just way too much is something to keep in mind. And I think that Milan was a little bit much for the time that we had in Italy, the time of year we were going. Like, it's just a lot in our time frame.
Yeah, absolutely. And there would have been cool stuff to see and do there, but didn't do any of it.
I was like, have to go onwards to the next city in order to get just like everywhere else we need to be on time. So
yeah. And the next city was
Cinque Terre,
which isn't a city.
Yeah. So it's like, it's on the coast on the west. It's really close to Milan. And we went there because, so Cinque Terre is like 5 lands.
Is that how you pronounce it?
Cinque Terre. I don't know if the's any Italians out there. Maybe let's do an Italian lesson.
You could probably also use the internet.
No, I'm pretty sure it's Cinque Terre. But it's 5 lands, I think is what it stands for. And there's like 5 cities along the coast. They're really close together. We kind of touched on it in our travel and food episode as well, because this is where I got the farinata from. And so we stayed in Rio Maggiore, maybe. And so that's on the very southern part. And then they recommend that you there's a train that goes between all 5 of the cities. So we actually took the train to the furthest north city, which was Monterosso. Don't think I'm butchering that one quite as badly. And then we hiked from Monterosso back down to Rio Maggiore. And you can do it. What are you shaking your head?
There had been a landslide between 2 of the cities. So the trail was closed and we had to take a train.
Oh yeah. No, I remember that. So we did hike from Monterosso down back to Rio Maggiore. We just had to take, I think it was like the last or 2 of the ones in the middle. We just had to take a little train through because we couldn't get through. There was a bunch of mud and it wasn't cleared up and whatnot from a landslide. I loved that hike though. I loved Cinque Terre. I loved Rio Maggiore.
Yeah, I think that's probably on like the top things to do in Italy. And I'm sure a lot of people who have been to Italy have done that. I know a lot of people I've met who have gone to Italy. That's like one of the top things to do.
I would definitely put it as one of my
and I'd
best
never
experiences.
This like our whole Europe trip was kind of just me, like just kind of going along most of the time. I had a couple things I wanted to do, but I had never heard about it before in my life.
Your planning is impeccable.
Didn't really know what to expect, and then we got there and I was like, wow, this is really a spectacular place.
Yeah, I mean, just being there is pretty spectacular. It's right on the cliffside, right on the ocean, and the houses are kind of just built into the cliffs on the side, and they're all painted very colorfully. So it's very, very pleasant on the eyes. Beautiful photos that you can get there, spectacular sunsets that you can watch, and just like really cool places. Like, it's sort of romantic there, and I feel like the tourism industry there is kind of like, you know, worked with that. And it's Italy, so it's like everywhere has these patios on the ocean. You can get your wine and your olives and eat your pizza, and it's kind of relaxing. And it was nice because we spent a lot of time in cities in Europe, like a lot of time. And I feel like any time where we got somewhere that wasn't a city and we could walk easier, like walk to and from places, I really enjoyed that. I think that was something that I really liked about being there.
Yeah, I remember just feeling, even though our destination before that had been Switzerland, so we'd been out hiking in the week before that. But it was a really nice just couple days, and especially the day we did the hike, it was just like brilliant mix of relaxation with hiking, because you get to go hike for an hour and a half or something like that. And then you get to a city and you can stop for coffee or, a snack. And then you hike another hour and then you get to another city. You find a little bar, have a glass of wine, continue on the next one. You stop for pizza, eat it by the beach.
Yeah, it's so luxurious. I feel like that's how I described it in our travel and food episode. It's like luxurious hiking.
But it certainly was hard at points. Like there's some steep uphills and it was really hot. So we were both sweating buckets.
Yeah, I didn't even realize how sweaty I was until we asked somebody to stop and take a photo of us. And I'm kind of turned in towards you so you can see like part of the side of my body. And I have like sweat marks, like circular sweat marks, like probably like 4 inches below my armpit. Just from like my arm being there. And like my arm was so sweaty and like I think our backs were drenched and it was crazy. Italy in August is just way too hot, I think.
Yeah, but when we went to leave, I think we both felt like we definitely come back and do the Cinque Terre again.
Yeah, definitely. That's 100% somewhere that I would go back to again, which is pretty rare, actually. I don't have a massive list of places that I really want to go back to. It's like a pretty small list.
But also a very small list of places you don't want to go back to.
Yeah, definitely. And then a lot of places that I'm pretty neutral about that I would go back to for sure if I had the opportunity or the opportunity arose for me.
Yeah, and one other interesting thing that happened in Rio Maggiore, however, I feel like we should have looked up the pronunciations before we started with this. We had booked into a hostel on Hostel World, which we thought was a hostel. And it's something that happened to us a couple times where you get somewhere, you're like, oh yeah, we're looking for a hostel. And you're like, oh, this isn't actually a hostel. It's someone has put a bunch of bunk beds in like an apartment.
Yeah. I really liked that place though. I thought it was kind of cool.
Well, we ended up having some fun people in the same room as us.
Yeah, it was kind of neat though, because it was like one really massive room, maybe 10 or 12 bunk beds. And then a nice like kitchen area and a bathroom. It's just kind of like a cool little area, I think. I remember like enjoying talking to the people that were in the room with us. Like I think there was some interesting folks who'd done some cool traveling. At this point too, we had also purchased our Southeast Asia Lonely Planet and I'd started making my way through that. So I remember like sitting in that kitchenette. I'd bought a highlighter and I was highlighting the areas of Southeast Asia that I wanted to visit. So kind of this like, I mean, it's always exciting to be somewhere new, but then to think about this other cool place or places that you're going to visit is also really exciting. So it's kind of an interesting thing about travel is sort of like you're kind of almost always like thinking about where your next places are going to be or getting some idea, and that research aspect of it is really fun to me. And so after Cinque Terre, we went to Florence.
Yeah, and Florence, I think, turned out to be one of our favorite cities in Europe.
Yeah, Florence is pretty amazing. We first talked about Florence on the podcast in episode 39 with our top 10 favorite hostels, and Archie Rossi, where we stayed in Florence, made that list. And somebody had recommended that hostel to us and was like, this is a really cool hostel. You should definitely stay there. And it is a cool hostel. We were talking about just before the episode. And it's definitely one of the cooler hostels that we did stay at. It's not very top of the list, though, I'd say. What do you think?
Yeah, it was nice, cheap food, cool, like, courtyard thing.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting to think about what makes a hostel great. And I mean, a lot of the times it has to do with who's in your room or the people you meet there. And we met a couple cool people. I remember, though, our room was clean and our beds were comfortable. And that's like a huge thing when you've been traveling long term, like to get on to a hostel bunk bed and it like isn't too squeaky. It's got like a pretty decent pillow. I mean, that's a real winner. So I think that was part of it. And then also you could get like plates of food for really, really, really cheap. And I think that helped us cut down on expenses, which as long-term backpackers, we really appreciated.
Yeah. And then beyond that, it had like a nice location right in downtown Florence. And to be able to stay right in that neighborhood, in that area of Florence, was really cool.
Yeah. Yeah. So we were maybe a 5-minute walk from the Duomo. Did I pronounce that right? Duomo?
Domo?
Domo?
I don't know how to pronounce it.
So the Duomo is like the main church in Florence. It's like right in the center, and it's got a massive dome on top of it. So that's what I guess makes it be called like the Domo or the Duomo. It's Duomo, which is why I think Duomo. But what were some of the highlights of being in Florence for you?
So number one for me would certainly be food. I think Florence, I was really pigging out a little bit. So
don't be so hard on yourself.
We found a really awesome gelato place, which we ate at consistently.
Like every day.
Yeah. We found a couple really good pizza places. And that was just basically pizza and gelato the entire time.
Yeah.
And another thing that was kind of a highlight, but is kind of since become a low light in my mind as I've matured. We were 21 at the time, degenerate college graduates, and really enjoyed watching the Jersey Shore. And at the time we were in Florence was right when the episode had come out. The season had come out of the Jersey Shore in Florence. And I don't remember, were we watching it in the lead up of going to Florence? Because we're like, hey, we're going here. Or did we start watching it when we were in Florence?
No, we watched it in the lead up. We like knew that it was in Italy. Because it was like we were pretty fresh out of university, and Jersey Shore came out while we were in university. And Jersey Shore made a really good drinking game. So we were like kind of into Jersey Shore.
It's just like the most absurd thing I'd ever seen.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of makes you feel good about your life.
Yeah, so we'd gotten to Florence and we're like, oh, hey, we know all about Florence. We watched it on the Jersey Shore. And you could go to the pizza shop that they worked at, for anyone who watched it. Which actually had really good pizza there.
Yeah, their pizza was delicious.
Yeah. And then one night we went out on like a pub crawl, one of the like pub crawls that are offered from your hostel. Go to this club, which, if anyone watches the Jersey Shore, they just go clubbing all the time. So it's like one of the clubs they go to in the show, which is always kind of amusing in real life to be going somewhere you've seen on TV. And then we see one of these guys who we recently watched on the show hooking up with one of the members of the Jersey Shore. And we're kind of like at the same, like hanging out dance floor with this random guy. We like take a photo with him. And it's funny prepping for this episode, looking through these photos and being like, oh, hey, we took a photo with this random guy who hooked up with one of the characters from the Jersey Shore. And it's kind of this, I think I just like face palmed. I was like, oh my God.
Yeah, you did face palm. It was an actual face palm that happened.
What was I doing about that? So, yeah, so that was at the time amusing.
I think it's still like kind of amusing. I don't know. I don't feel like good about the fact that I watched so much Jersey Shore. I think that was like season 3. So, it happened though. A thing of the past. Makes for a good story though, right?
Yeah, definitely. It's funny. It was funny seeing that photo and kind of remembering back to that.
Do you know what's funny too is I remember looking up that pizza shop and then finding it, and it's not like it's right in, I guess, like downtown Florence, but it's not on a major street. Like you kind of have to go looking for it, which can be a bit of a task in a city like Florence where the streets aren't very like well named and they're all cobblestone, and so it's a bit complicated to find it. And then we found it and we were so awkward, like standing in front of it. Like neither of us wanted to like get a photo in front of it. Just like snapped a photo and then went in, like pretended like we didn't know that Jersey Shore had worked there.
Yeah, even though it's plastered on the window.
I'm certain there's people eating there that like were like, I don't know who Jersey Shore is. I'm just going to eat here.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Like it's one of the top pizza shops in Florence, I think.
Yeah, and then just generally Florence is an extremely scenic city.
Yeah. Yeah, one of the things that I really liked about Florence was just walking around. Like we spent a whole day just walking through the streets, and they've got a really cool, it's like a house or whatever that's built kind of like a bridge over top of the canal, and you can go across one of the bridges and you can see that, and that's an extremely beautiful view, and just everywhere is very, very scenic. We went in to see the statue of David as well, which is also quite scenic. Boom, boom. Shh. He's a naked statue. I'm just making a joke.
Okay. Yeah, I remember we had to wait quite a while to get into that.
Yeah, we did have to wait quite a while. I mean, it's pretty famous. I don't know. I'm not an art person, so I don't really know why the statue of David is so famous, but it's one of the most famous statues in the world.
Well, I think just because it's...
Maybe because it's one of the most intricately built statues in the world. And he's naked.
Well, it's just a big hunk of marble. It's all one piece.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive, though, to think that somebody just did that.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think it's one of those things traveling Europe, too. Like, you go do all these things that are kind of like the to-do things. So you go and see the Mona Lisa at the Louvre, and
at the Louvre.
When you're in Florence, you go see the statue of David. But it's like one of these things that everyone does because it's popular. So you wait in line and you're like, I'm doing this because it's like the thing to do, but like, you know, I'm not a big statue guy. Like, I can't really appreciate this for what it is. So I'm kind of just doing it to have done it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I do.
It kind of feels weird.
I definitely do. Like, I think that had you had a background in some sort of like art or statue, or you'd ever done anything with pottery, you'd be like, whoa, this is like pretty crazy. You'd have a whole different understanding for the intricacy of that statue. I think at the same time, if you're always like, oh, you know, I'm not that interested in art, and you never go see any of those beautiful things, like, you'd be very like closed-minded to it, you know? Like, I think that it's cool to go see those things.
Yeah,
to kind of just have those wow moments. Yeah,
seeing them can lead to a greater appreciation. Not always necessary that you have the appreciation before you see it.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's cool to go see like a statue that's obviously become famous because it's so impressive.
Yeah, I remember feeling this way a couple times though. When you're there, you wait in a long line, and then you're in, and you're kind of like, okay, like, I don't really know how to appreciate these things. So I look at them, I'm like, oh yeah, pretty cool, I guess. Like, let's go get some ice cream.
Do you think that would be different now that you're older and wiser and more mature?
Sophisticated?
Yeah.
To some degree, and with some things, I think I have like less patience to wait in line for things.
Because you know what's at the end of the line?
Well, I remember, so what's coming to my mind is going to Versailles in France, and it was just like gigantic line. It was like being at like the most crowded house party you've ever been in, but it's like this gigantic palace thing. And walking around and just being like, not feeling it.
Yeah, maybe the only person in the world who hated Versailles.
I cannot be the only one.
I think you might be the only one. I think so. My question is to you: do you think that there's some worth in, before going to things like that, having some sort of background knowledge on them? Because there's a ton of like shows and books that are set in the era of
absolutely
Versailles.
I think that's like the key thing. Mm-hmm. Like, not just doing it because you're there and you're like, oh, I got to do it. Because there's like a replica of the statue of David somewhere in Florence. So you can see what it looks like outside, no line. So the reason you go into the museum is to see the actual one. Mm-hmm. The one that Michelangelo was chipping away at. And I think having an appreciation beforehand is important.
Yeah.
Or else, like, because doing things to say you've done things is fairly unfulfilling in the long term.
Yeah, definitely. I know that there's, like, for me personally, when I have some sort of like connection to the history of that thing, I appreciate it a lot more. Like, for example, I've been reading Gone with the Wind while hanging out down in Georgia, and it's been really cool to read the book and learn about the Civil War, and then have an appreciation for these like plaques that are near to our house, like where you're currently living. And it just makes it way more meaningful to me, I guess, because now I understand it.
It comes alive a little bit.
Yeah, like it's like, wow, like Peachtree Creek battle happened like a block from where we currently are. And like Scarlett O'Hara, like knew people who fought in that battle. Like that's crazy. Even though she's a fictional character.
Yeah.
But it kind of just makes it come alive a little bit more. So I think that having that background can make things more fulfilling while you're traveling.
Yeah. And then also it works the other way too. I remember coming home after our trip, and not too long after we got home, we listened to the audiobook of whatever the sequel to the Da Vinci Code is.
Oh, it's
Inferno.
Inferno, yeah. Hey, Robert Brown.
Yeah, and that's like really like this big like Florence tour. And it was cool to have this like mental image of being some of these places where they're going.
Yeah, totally. That's a great point. It's interesting because so we went to Rome after we went to Florence, which is like the place to go when you go to Italy. But I'd actually been to Rome once before. And I know that I'd read the Da Vinci Code and what's that other one?
Name's not coming to me.
Yeah, me either. The other book, and you can do like my mom and I went on a Da Vinci
Someone listening
Code.
is like, it's this, it's this.
Yeah, my mom and I went on a Da Vinci Code.
Oh,
tour.
Angels and Demons.
Angels and Demons, yes, killed it. And it's really cool. Like Angels and Demons has a whole thing with like St. Peter's Basilica, and it's really cool when you've been there. So it's like I went there after reading the book, and I was like, "This is where so and so had this happen." Like that's
This
so
is where
cool.
Tom Hanks was.
Yeah, like pretty much. It's just so the other way around is also pretty cool. But yeah, moving on to Rome. I mean, Rome is like whether or not you're a Gladiator fan or a Da Vinci Code fan or what other movies have been set in Rome.
Maybe like a part of the Bourne series.
Regardless of, you know, what sort of interaction you've had with Rome, like I think it can be really cool in a lot of different ways. Or maybe if you've never
and
read anything about Rome, which is kind of weird, but
I think you get like Roman history, you know, it's the center of this gigantic empire that everyone's learned about at some point.
Yeah, definitely. And so that was your first time to Rome. What were your first impressions?
So we got to Rome and it was still Italy in August. So everything is really...
I think it was like the worst in Rome.
Yeah, other than the main tourist spots, very dead and very like quiet and empty. So I don't know what we were doing, but we booked like last minute. So we had to stay out in the boonies.
Out in the boonies, it wasn't that
this
far, but
strange Minnesota themed hostel.
Yeah.
Twin Cities hostel. Shout out. With Vikings stuff everywhere. If anyone's from Minnesota and listening, that's your spot for sure. If you're not from Minnesota, maybe not.
I got bitten by some bugs there, so it's debatable. I don't know. I don't think they were bed bugs. Maybe they're just like mosquito things that flew in, but I don't know. Either way, I had a bunch of like bug bites on my body. Yeah,
but anyways, I really enjoyed being in Rome and getting to go to the Colosseum, go to the Vatican, even though I'm not religious, to check that out was pretty cool. More good food. Just walking around the city, there's tons of cool stuff to see.
Yeah, I mean, the Trevi Fountain is something that I think is absolutely beautiful to see. Do you remember throwing pennies in the Trevi Fountain?
I do.
And then Spanish Steps is right near there as well, which is like a cool place to go have a picnic or that sort of thing. Something that I really like about Rome too is that they have these like sort of water fountain type things where water's just coming out of the side of buildings and it's really clean water. So you can fill your water bottle up there and it's really like, it's cool and it tastes fresh and it's really just awesome because when you're traveling a ton and you have to buy water bottles constantly, it's nice to just not have to do that for a little while.
Yeah, especially when you're in this place where everywhere is charging for water, which is a bit weird at first coming from North America.
Yeah, definitely. We also went to the Pantheon. And the Pantheon's pretty cool architecturally because it's really tall and then it's round. So there's burials kind of in it and around in the walls. And then there's a hole in the ceiling, which I think is glassed over now, but it's like a completely circular hole, which goes right down to the middle, like shines light right down to the middle of the building. So it's like a pretty cool place to check out.
It's cool because there's a hole in the ceiling?
I think just architecturally it's cool. Like the history behind it and the architecture makes it a pretty neat place to check out in Rome.
Yeah, and I think that there are lots of beautiful things to see in Rome. But I think kind of what we talked about in Florence too, where maybe we both didn't have like the historical knowledge to appreciate some of these things.
I mean, most of my Roman history knowledge comes from Gladiator.
The movie.
The movie.
Yeah, I think that going back, like I would love to know more about it. And we had done in Europe tours occasionally where you get obviously some over glorified stuff sometimes, but also some good history and context to put things into. Mm-hmm. But having that in Rome would also be cool.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that watching Gladiator gave me like a whole different appreciation for the Colosseum as it is now, just because when you look at it, it's like really hard to envision it as what it was. And then when you see a movie where it's kind of like they've used the Colosseum and you're like, oh, okay, like tigers came out of that. Like, that's kind of cool. I mean, I think that was real, but back in the day, they used tigers, didn't they?
I'm not sure.
I might be completely stupefying myself right now.
Stupefying.
Yeah.
Instead of verb.
Making myself sound stupid.
Yeah, the Colosseum was somewhere I was really excited to see. I think because it is more like this thing you see in movies and like, oh wow, the gladiator things happen here. It's this gigantic ancient building that's still standing, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible to go check that out. And
to know that this thing is from thousands of years ago. The only other thing that comes to mind, or obviously we've seen some other amazing things, temples of Angkor, some of the Greek ruins, and then the other thing that comes to mind is pyramids would be an amazing thing to see these gigantic things from thousands and thousands of years ago. And of course, Machu Picchu.
Check out the episode of Machu Picchu.
Yeah, but cool experience. But once again, you know, there's a ton of people there and you're kind of walking around jammed up.
It wasn't that bad. I feel like you've made that worse in your head. Like we have like pretty solid photos without like other people in them. I don't know. Maybe this is me comparing it to July is like, so people like don't go as much in August because things are closed. And the first time I went was in July. And it was actually so crazy that the tour guide that took us around, she had like this headpiece that she talked into, and we all had like these devices with like earbuds in our ears because that was the only way to hear her. Mm. So I don't know. I feel like it was less busy when you and I went than the first time when I went.
Yeah. And then so the other big place we went and spent a day was the Vatican. What did you think about your Vatican experience?
Yeah, I mean, the Vatican is extremely impressive. It's it's an interesting experience. Like it's, you know, going to this whole different little land. So like it's
Vatican City.
Yeah, it kind of feels like being on Game of Thrones and being at one of the castles, kind of. Like there's the guards and their like funny uniforms and you know, there's only certain places you can go to and everything's very extravagant. Like the basilica is, I mean, it's just outstanding. Like there's no real other way to describe it. Like the intricacy of that building for how old it is so impressive. And then going into the Sistine Chapel where there's this extravagant detailed piece of artwork on the ceiling, and it's completely silent when you're in the Sistine Chapel and you can't take any photos, or at least you're not supposed to. I think most people kind of like snap a secret photo, but you're not actually supposed to photograph in there. But it's like very much about being silent, and it's kind of interesting to be in this place where you're so surrounded by people and it's just, you could hear a pin drop in there because it's so silent.
I don't remember it being like that at all.
What are you remembering it like?
I don't remember it being that silent.
It is definitely silent. You're not allowed to talk in there.
It seems like an arbitrary rule.
No, there was like nuns, like kind of.
But it was just really busy. And everyone's like looking up at the ceiling.
Yeah, like it's jam packed with people. But it's quiet. It's just weird how quiet it is for how many people are in there. Like there's, at least 100 people, probably more in there. And there's like quite a bit of silence. And then from there you walk through sort of the rest of Vatican City. You can go see like the main square. That's a pretty cool experience.
Yeah, it's interesting being in some place that is like this holy thing for a large religion, but it's kind of just become like a tourist attraction.
Yeah, I mean, to us it has, I guess. I don't know how people who are part of the Catholic religion feel about that. I don't really know. We did not see the Pope, unfortunately. I was hoping to spot the Pope while we were there. We didn't get to see him though. But it's kind of cool. You can see like all the tombs of the old popes when you're in the basilica, which is pretty interesting. Like both Ryan and I are not religious, so we spend like basically no time in churches. And so it's kind of interesting to spend a bit of time and just like admire the beauty of this kind of like vast, majestic place.
Mm-hmm.
So other highlights of Rome? Anything else that you really enjoyed that you would recommend people to go to, not do?
Well, so like let's look at Italy as a whole. What are the things you'd definitely do again, like to do when we go back in the future, and maybe wouldn't do if you could go back?
That's a great question. So I would definitely go back to Cinque Terre. I think I would spend more time in Italy, like not just kind of rush down sort of the western side of Italy. Like I've been over to Venice, and I think that Venice is really cool and worth the visit if you can get over there. And I think doing the Amalfi Coast and that sort of thing would be an addition to that trip. So I think just having more time, like not rushing it. I've also been to Pisa, which we stopped at on a train ride. We had like a train ride layover almost, but the Leaning Tower is on the opposite side of the train station, and we just didn't have quite enough time to go. But I actually think Pisa is a really cool little city, like to see the tower, and you can climb up to the very top of it through stairs. So you take like this winding set of stairs to go all the way to the top. And it's weird because when you're on it, you don't feel like you're leaning. You kind of just feel like the rest of the world is sort of tipped, which is kind of a cool thing. So I think making time for little places like that. And even I know we talked about going down to Pompeii. And I think that
any Italian listening to this episode has just been horrified.
Sorry. But going down to Pompeii, I think would be really cool. Like making time for those little places and making time for other places.
Like little places. Like these are some pretty
Pisa is like pretty little,
massive historical tourist destination.
Yeah, that's fair. But just like smaller than Rome. Like people go to Rome. Like that's what they go to Italy for. It seems like it's to go to Rome. So I just say like add, some extra time. Take your time while you're there. Explore as much as you can. Things I wouldn't do again is go to a city just for one night for a soccer game. I think that that's not really the way that I like to travel anymore. Kind of just like, stepping back, taking a breath, and just reminding myself that everything doesn't need to happen at once. There's time in the future to have other experiences, and sometimes they're better when you wait for them.
Yeah, definitely.
I think those are my biggest things. Italian food is like the best, so go to Italy and prepare to eat. You walk a lot, so it's fine. What about you?
Yeah, I definitely echo some of the stuff you're saying about I'd love to go down to Pompeii and see that. Pisa's kind of like whatever, but just getting to explore more, like exploring the areas around Florence would be cool, or seeing more of the area around the Cinque Terre, or going down to Sicily.
Mm-hmm.
I think something that we kind of learned traveling is that these like big, like top of the list tourist destinations aren't like as fulfilling or exciting to experience as kind of just like the random places. that aren't as popular. If that
Yeah.
makes sense. So like, you know, you go to Europe for the first time and you feel like you've got to go to the Vatican and you've got to go to whatever, the Basilica thing. Pantheon.
The Pantheon or St. Peter's Basilica?
Sorry, I meant the Pantheon originally.
Okay. I totally hear what you're saying, and I agree in most cases. I kind of disagree when it comes to Rome, though. I feel like if you go to Rome and you don't see the Colosseum, you've like kind of let yourself down, because the Colosseum is amazing.
I don't know. I want to talk to the people who've done that. Just, we went, whatever. Screw the Colosseum.
I mean, if you did that, like that's pretty good willpower. I don't know if I could do that. That'd be really hard for me. Something like the Colosseum, it's in freaking Gladiator.
What if it hadn't been in Gladiator?
It's in every Roman history textbook. It's like the cover of like some social studies textbooks from when you're like in school.
There's probably some other stuff on the cover of social studies textbooks that isn't John A. MacDonald.
I don't know if you're making your case with me. I totally do. I do understand what you're saying though, and I do agree in most cases, but I don't agree with when it comes to Rome.
Yeah, or like, okay.
Maybe the Pantheon, but not Vatican City.
Yeah, I guess it's the thing is like you expect all these places that are like, okay, we're in Rome. What have we, like, there's this thing you create in your mind of like, okay, we're here. Now we got to get to our checklist, right? Like we've got to get to the fountain. We've got to get to the steps. We've got to get to the Vatican, blah, blah, blah. And so we've been lots of places like this where you've got your checklist of things to see. And we've been to places where there's no checklist. Like, I don't know, a city that we really loved was Medellin in Colombia. And there's some like stuff to see there, but there's nothing, you don't feel like you have to see these things in the way that you can get the impression that you should in Europe with certain things. And I just really like those experiences better, where it's more just about like hanging out, lifestyle, finding cool restaurants, finding cool hikes, finding ways to spend your day pleasurably doing things that you like, versus trying to find get these tick marks and these photographs of, oh, been to the Colosseum, check, been to the Vatican, check, like here's a funny looking soldier, got that photo.
Yeah, okay. I totally get what you're saying. And I think that it is important to kind of have your own adventure and stuff, even in a city like Rome. Like, you know, allow yourself to kind of go off the beaten path a little bit and discover the things that are cool in the city outside of the things that are the must-see tourist, whatever.
Yeah, and I guess it kind of speaks to like, there is a Rome that exists today that's like culturally unique. Like there's people who live in Rome who have cool lives, who are kind of this Roman culture that exists today. And then there's this history that's there that doesn't exist anymore. It's all kind of this like illusion and like play that's being put on of, oh, this is Rome from 2,000 years ago. So it's not, of course it's not going to be authentic, but if you've got the context, like the history, and you're interested in that kind of stuff, it's really valuable and interesting. So I think that having some more, like digging deeper into history while I was doing these things and getting off the beaten path and seeing some other places that are less visited would be on my list of things to do. Yeah,
definitely. I totally get that. Anywhere else in Italy other than Pompeii that you'd like to see? Pompeii? If you went back?
Pompeii.
Pompeii.
Sicily seems kind of cool. Venice is kind of one of those like checklist type places. But I think it'd be interesting to go visit there.
Especially before it sinks.
And then, nothing on the top of my, like the Alps, Italian Alps would be cool. I think that looking back at our Europe trip though, Florence is definitely one of the cities that I really, really enjoyed. Mm-hmm. And would love to go back to again.
Yeah, definitely. Cool. Do you have any final words to say to our guests before we... Not our guests, our listeners, before we...
The only word I have for our listeners is tomato.
Tomato? Should I say cheese? As in making a pizza?
Yeah. And if you want to be the first to know about new updates, new episodes, posts, and future materials, you can sign up to our newsletter on our website. It'll come up and ask you, or hit the newsletter area at the bottom. And we will also send you a free copy of our super condensed guide to South America,
called the No Bullshit Guide to South America. And you can find all of that at www.theworldwanders.com.
Yes. To find more information, relevant links, and photos talked about in this week's episode, check out theworldwanders.com.
If you have a question, comment, or feedback, send us an email at info@theworldwanders.com. Join our community on Facebook at The World Wanderers or on Twitter at WorldWanderers1. As always, thanks so much for listening.
Have a great day.
Bye.